Good morning. My name's Kyle Houchins. I'm a tech and a trainer for McNeil, and this is Getting Started Rhino for Windows. Thank you for joining us this morning or this evening, as the case may be, for our folks who are joining us from overseas. It is the pumpkin spice latte leaf peeping spooky season starting here in the US. And so as the case may be, I thought we'd try to do something a little Halloweenish. And this actually started from a long time ago when we were actually working on SubD. This was something that I did years ago. Actually, looks like it was May of 2020. I took a crack at, trying to, I was doing a lot of testing for SubD. SubD had just come out, and we were trying to do a bunch of stuff where, we could see what the tool could do and all this stuff. So I grabbed this, and I'll put this link in the chat if you're interested in seeing it. Um, Basically, what I was doing is I was throwing out a bunch of different SubD challenges, and here's a SubD challenge master list if you want to see all that stuff. And this is one of the things that I threw out as far as what can we do with SubD, and a human skull and characters and things like that are always kind of, as far as I'm concerned, the pinnacle of how to model stuff, right? Because if you can model something as complex as a skull, then there really isn't anything else that you can't model, right? It's like modeling a toaster is pretty easy if you can model a skull. So I kind of took this you know as a what if, and I beat on it for a long time, and I was actually able to come up with something. My anatomy professor from college is probably having chest pains right now, but the result actually was less important than the process, and the process was to see whether I could do this in SubD, and the answer is yes. And so here we are, you know, 2-ish years later, and the tools have developed and my skills have developed and all that kind of stuff. And so something that took me probably, if I'm being honest, probably the better part of a day and a half of going forward and going backwards, trying to figure out how to get to this point right here. We're going to try and pull off in about an hour and a half. So we'll see. Maybe I'll fling this one into the blender. We'll see. But that's half the fun of these. The other thing that I wanted to point out is there's this great book on Amazon. Actually, this great book, whether you buy it on Amazon or wherever you buy it, I don't really care. But this is the link for it, called Pushing Points Topology Workbook. And this is actually a really great book if you're just starting your SubD journey and want to learn a little bit more about topology. We're going to talk a lot about topology today and how to lay stuff out. We're also going to talk about rule of three. And if you haven't, I should have had this loaded already. If you don't have this video bookmarked, you should. And this one is, and I should have had this loaded already, sorry. We're going to talk about this a lot today, and you don't want to sell me solar. This is the video there, and that talks about how we make corners and how we make transitions. We're going to talk a lot about rule of three. You're going to hear me reference that a lot. And the quick before I finish on this book, sorry, there is a second version of this, the Topology Workbook Volume 2 by the same author, which is also very, very good. And then this anatomy guide is actually this Add All Three to Cart. Amazon actually did a good job of pairing these together because these books actually work really well together. So if you're interested in that, check those out. I highly recommend all of those. I learned a lot from them myself, and they're definitely worth picking up. All right, so let's jump into this. The first thing that I want to cover really quick is rule of three. And rule of three is something that we already know from NURBS. And it basically means that we need 3 points to make a corner, right? 1, 2, 3. We don't need 5. We don't need 20. We need 3. And if we move this closer, This transition gets sharper if we move these farther apart. This transition gets softer. This also is required if we're going to make a transition that looks like this. And in this case, what happens is now 1, 2, 3, these points make up this transition right here. 1, 2, 3. These points make up this transition right here. And then obviously these 3 make up this point right here. Now, the difference between this example and this example is, in this example, these 3 points are isolated, right? They operate independently from the end. If I come down here, this transition still exists. If I pull it out here, this transition still exists because it is not influenced by this point or this point, right? They're not part of the transition. If I go to this example, now what I've done is I've actually involved these, because now these are involved as this group, and this group. There's 3 distinct different groups here, but they steal from each other, right? This group here steals this point from this group. Does that make sense? Everybody with me? So the interesting thing about this, if we go back here, is sub D follows the exact same rule. So if I go here and I grab a sub D cube and I bring this out and I just hit enter and we turn on the points and we do that just like we do over here, look what we've got, right? If we ignore, let's just ignore this for now. Let's get rid of these. Let's just get rid of these faces. Stop it. Faces. Get rid of these. And I'm going to get rid of these. All right, so notice anything? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Very, very similar. Look what happens if I move this edge instead of just point range, right? That transition gets tighter. If I move it far aparter, move it far aparter. Yeah, okay, that's how it's going to go today. Then we get a different transition, right? If I take this and I move it in 3D space, look what happens. I get this same shape. All right. So everything that you know about making NURBS curves applies to sub D as well. And so if we're going to make a transition, we need 3 edges, 3 points, right? 3 faces, actually 3 edges, that's 3 points in order to make a transition. So that's the basis of rule of 3. So the video goes into much more detail. So let's talk about the topology on this now and how we're going to lay this out. And I'm going to zoom in on this and I'm going to take a screenshot and then we're going to jump into a paint program and just do a little chalk talk here real quick before we get going. And let's talk about how you would even think about approaching something like this. Like, this is a very, very complex object, right? How do you even begin to think about this? Well, sub D can be pretty much defined as everything that you need to know about sub D. You can figure out if you've got a stack of Post-it notes in front of you. And if you've got a stack of Post-it notes in front of you and you just start pulling off little squares and sticking them together, you can pretty much figure out the topology for anything that you want to do. And so in this case, if we go and we start looking at this, what we're going to do is we're going to, first of all, we're going to define the face mask. And the face mask consists of the nose and the eyes. Everything is going to be based out of here. And what we can start doing is we can just start, let's just start connecting some dots here. Let's just start doing this. And we may vary from this a little bit, but, and then we can say, well, that seems to make sense going out of there. And then we're going to pull one out of here like this. And then maybe we're going to pull one out like this, right? And then we need to kind of follow this shape around. So let's just start doing this, right? And then we can come in like that. Same thing with the wiggliness of my lines. You can see how much coffee I've had this morning. And we can start doing either things like that, or we can do things like this, and we can start now kind of chasing our way around this thing, right? And then we're going to come kind of down in here to the mouth area, and then maybe we're going to pull through here like this, right? And so you can see that we're going to just start kind of laying things out. Now, rule of three says that if we're going to pull this surface up, right? I can't draw straight into my face, but imagine that that's going up, or this part is going down, then we need to have this edge. We need to have an edge that's going to go in the center. So if we draw an edge that goes all the way around like that, and then we need another edge in order to be able to get this to go down. So we're going to need an edge through here, right? So now we can go down, up, down, and then this one, and then we're probably going to tuck a third one down in here somewhere in order to be able to bend this edge. But you can see how you can start going through and like laying this stuff out, right? And we need to poke this in, which means that we're going to need an edge kind of through there like that, right? And so now we can start saying like, okay, there's our 1, 2, 3. So this can go down, this can come back up, this can go up, down, up like that if we've got this edge through here. And you can start kind of giving yourself an idea of how this goes, right? And so a lot of times when I'm working on a project like this, I would actually sit down and go through this process and draw the topology. I'd then take that into Rhino itself as a picture frame and then start, laying the thing out there. Now, we're going to do this whole thing, right? We're going to lay this whole thing out in what I like to refer to as paper doll, which is we're going to lay this thing out dead flat, just like we would if we had a bunch of Post-it notes and we were laying this down on a desk and we were going to make this shape. And the reason that we're going to do that is because it makes it easy, right? It's simple. We don't have to worry about three-dimensional space. We can just worry about getting our topology layout right. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to essentially lay out the face mask, which is basically just going to consist of this kind of area right in here. We're going to worry about this part first. And once we get that part laid out, then we can either get rid of, we can either, trying to clear these drawings here. We can either go and project it onto a sphere, which is probably what we're going to end up doing, and then wrap the rest of this stuff around. But for now, we're just going to start laying this thing out flat. And as typical with Rhino, what I've done is I've brought this image in as a picture frame. I've stuck it back from the origin just a little bit so that the model doesn't bisect the image, and that way I can't see the back of it. And then I've thrown it in a layer. And the last thing I'm going to do is unlock this, click on it, go to its material, and then I'm actually going to scroll down here a little bit, and I'm going to just crank the transparency up a little bit so it fades out so that I can work over it without having it be quite so obtrusive. And then we'll go back to the layers and lock it. So let's just jump into this and get going. And the way, let's center this just a little bit. That way I can have some semblance of symmetry. And by the way, you don't want skulls and faces and characters to be dead symmetrical because they'll look weird. That's referred to as the uncanny valley. It makes it feel really creepy for some reason. Your brain reacts to things that are characters and stuff that are too symmetrical as being odd. Symmetry is often related to beauty, but identical symmetry, easy for you to say, identical symmetry makes your characters feel creepy. So you have to actually alter the symmetry a little bit from side to side, otherwise your brain will go, "That's something's wrong with that. I'm not comfortable with it." If you saw the movie, oh, what was it? That Christmas movie that Tom Hanks was in. My brain is fading me this morning, but all the characters in there were super creepy, and they fell right smack dab into the center of the uncanny valley, which is not what we want. All right, so let's go to the sub-D tab, and I'm going to start this out with just a single sub-D face, and I'm going to start that just with 4 clicks, and I'm going to just place one right here. And I'm going to hit the tab key, and I'm going to switch to box mode. And all right, so there's our first face. And then I'm going to just, why are you going away? Stop being like that. All right, there we go. So I've got a single sub-D face. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just shift control click on an edge, or if you're on a Mac, you're going to command control click. I'm going to grab the C-plane waffle up here. I'm going to start dragging, but then I'm going to hold down control. And I'm just going to pull out a face. And then I'm going to shift control drag a point. I'm going to pull this out a little bit because I want this to be fairly radial. I want all these edges to kind of, vaguely follow in this kind of radial pattern. So I'm going to just extrude, and I'm going to go kind of coarse with this. I don't need to add a ton of detail here, because I can always subdivide. I can always add more. I can always do all that kind of stuff later. So don't overdo this, right? So 1, 2, 3, that's going to make up this shape down here, right? 1, 2, 3, that's going to make up that shape. I don't need 65 different edges through here. Don't make too much stuff. All right, so I'm going to go here, there. Sometimes I like to lay out a bunch of faces and then go back and kind of adjust their orientation later. That down there. Just shift control dragging to get that. And then I'm going to pick these two, and I'm just going to bridge. I've got a hotkey set up for that, but the command is bridge. And I'm going to just use one segment, and I'm just going to join it. I'm not going to crease it. And what that does is that gives me my first, right? If I hit tab, I can see what the smooth result is. And then maybe I want to switch to smooth mode, and then maybe I want to actually drag this around a little bit to get a little closer to my art. And I'm not too worried about, are these edges too big, too small? Are they, is the ring too big, too small, all that kind of stuff. I don't really worry about that because it's all adjustable. It's one of the beautiful things about sub-D is you can just kind of get after it. You don't need to really stress out or worry about it because it's this wonderfully kind of plastic thing that you can just kind of keep messing with. So I'm going to just I'm going to just mirror this using the mirror command. And I know I said don't use symmetry, but we're going to start symmetrical because it's going to make our life easy. And then the next thing that we're going to do is I'm going to just do the same thing. I'm going to start dragging an edge and hold down control. I'm going to pull this out to here. And because I used mirror with history, look what happens. When I pull that out, this guy goes with it. So that's kind of cool. So I can pull this out there, and then I can grab these two and stitch them. And then I'm going to pull, maybe I might even go so far as to just yank this all the way over here like this. And then maybe I'm going to pull this up a little bit like that. And then I'm going to pull one out like that. Maybe one more. And then we can bridge these two together. And when I do this, that's going to kill history between the two. Because now if I move this over here, it's going to be dead on that side. But that's fine. We don't care about that. I'm going to take these two and stitch them together right now. And then that makes up kind of the basis for my face, right? And this is pinching at the top because these aren't joined. So this is actually just one point joined to itself. So there's no way for it to kind of figure out how to manage that. I'm going to bridge between these two, but I'm going to use one extra segment so that I can have a center line. And then what I'm going to do is pull this and this, and I'm just going to stitch these together. All right, now that's going to give me that rounded shape because it's got something that it can kind of work with. So then I can just adjust this just a little bit. I always like to say model in box mode and then adjust in smooth mode. So we've got our basic here. Now check this out. I've got all these edges right here. I can just grab this extrude dot now and go boop and boop. And that gives me the opportunity to, because I've got 1, 2, 3, that gives me the opportunity to either be able to push this in or pull this out, depending on what I need, right? That's why we do that 3. So that's going to give us the basis of what we need. Now, in order to get this little thing sticking up in the middle of the nose, we'll have to add some edges at a later date, but I'm not terribly concerned about that right now. What I want to do is basically make the rest of the face mask. And so let's grab all of these edges here. And I'm going to leave these alone for the time being. And I'm just going to pull up 1, 2, and I'm going to go somewhere up in there. I'm going to scale this flat. And then I'm going to grab these points and I'm going to bend them. I'm just going to bend them down like that. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Bend is a wonderful deformer for sub D because it allows you to make really kind of nice, even procedural bends like that. And then this edge, I may want to straighten that one a little bit, move it down, scale it out. This one, I may want to do a little bit of this going on, scale. And then this, I may want to pull this out like that so it makes the continuation of that edge. And that gives us the basis of our face, right? Now, we may need to add a few things in here, but that's okay. So now what we need to do is start thinking about like, okay, how are we going to get this thing into 3D space? How are we going to start getting this from being flat into something that we can then start messing with? The other thing that we need to worry about is we've only got, these are our 3 edges right here. So that means the only thing that we can do with this ring right here is we can pull it out like that or push it in like that. But the problem is that doesn't necessarily give us kind of what we want. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this entire thing by double clicking. I'm going to start dragging a scale handle. I'm going to hold down shift, right? So now I've got a uniform scale. Then I'm going to hold down control and I'm going to extrude out one more set of faces there. So double click, start dragging, hold down shift, hold down control, and that's going to extrude out another set of faces. I'm going to do the same thing here. Start dragging, hold down shift, hold down control. That gives me that. Now, what I've got now, 1, 2, 3. That means I can push this ring in or out, and it gives me that ability to be able to either add a bump or add a dent, right? Which is what we're looking for. All right. So how do we get this thing into 3D space? And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go and throw a sphere in space. And I'm going to just throw it kind of in here like this. And I kind of want this to approximate like what the actual like shape of the skull is going to be. And we don't need to get crazy with this. We don't need to like obsess over the shape of this because basically all we're going to do is use this as a splat to be able to take this and kind of splat this object here onto this. And so I'm going to make this actually a little bigger because I want to make sure that it hits it. I don't want it to pass. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag select all of these faces, and then I'm going to go back to the sub-D tool, and I'm going to use this toggler, and I'm going to toggle all of those so I'm just seeing the points. And then what I'm going to do is go here to project, and then I'm going to, these are pre-selected, and then this is the surface I'm going to project onto. And then I'm going to project this one. Why are you not projecting? So select curves and points to project. So let's run a filter. Bring up the filter first. There it is. And I'm going to do control points. And then that should allow, nope, let's turn the points on for the object. All right, so let's do it this way. So let's run this, select curves and points to project. We're going to grab these guys here like that. Let's make it moderately symmetrical. And these guys too. And then this is the surface it's going to project onto. We're going to do this in the front view before we finish it. And then we're going to just smack that right to there. And you'll see that basically what it's done is it's made a copy of this thing. So I'm just going to delete that. But check this out. What it's done is now taken this thing and just slapped all of those points onto that sphere, which gives us the basis of our skull. And we can just take these. These are easy. We can just go boop and just put that right where we want it, right? No big deal. Now that we're vaguely three-dimensional, now we can start playing with what does this thing actually start looking like. And so I probably want to raise these edges kind of like this, and I'll kind of want to pull those out a little bit to give it a little bit of a brow. And then this ring, I probably want to start tucking back like that. And maybe I want to look at art and say that needs to scale up quite a bit. And now the fun begins, right? Now we can start actually getting somewhere, because we are pretty much to the point now where we have everything that we need in order to start making this shape do what we want. And so I'm going to take this edge and I'm going to poke it back like that, but I'm going to take these edges and I'm going to pull them forward to make the bridge of the nose. And then I'm going to pull these guys forward quite a bit like that. And it would help if we have some side reference, which I do. So I'll start getting that going here in a minute. But you can see how this starts to develop, right? And then this bridge of this nose probably needs to go in a little bit. And then the brows kind of maybe need to furrow a little bit. Of the right direction. C-plane waffles are super useful for this kind of stuff because you can move just in a plane. And then maybe we add a little brow up here. That. Start changing the attitude of this opening. And typically what I'll do is I'll work on one side of this, and then when I'm happy with that, we'll do a reflect. And then the reflect is something that we can then take off later and then modify more so that we don't get that symmetry creepiness. Now we need to add that little detail in the center of the nose. So I'm going to just grab a face and extrude it, and I'm going to scale that in. And then might actually need a little bit more detail in there. So let's actually add an edge. So I'm going to just grab this tool right here. We're going to click on this, and we're just going to draw a new edge right through there. And that's the add points tool. And I can just take this now, and I can just pull this up. And because I don't have quite enough detail to be able to get the sharpness on that I needed, let's actually add an edge on either side of that, like this. And then actually I'm going to delete this edge because now I have that, right? And that gives me kind of what I need. And I'm going to go to box mode to make sure that I haven't made a mess of anything. And in this case, it looks like these points have gotten a little out of shape. And then let's actually take this face a little bit like that. And then it would be nice if we could tuck this face in a little bit, but let's see what it's doing. Actually, I don't hate that. So let's keep going. Add a little brow in here. Once you've got the basic skull modeled, then you can like start, you know, adding characterization and stuff like that. And I'm not going to get too deep into that, otherwise this will turn into a 40-hour video, but basic shapes we just kind of want to hit. And so let's look at our art and see what other kind of details we kind of need to add. And we need to add this kind of tuck right here. Well, this is my set of 3 right now, so I don't have enough detail in order to be able to add that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to introduce an n-gon into this, and I'm going to just draw this shape kind of where I want it to be, like that. And I'm going to let that be an n-gon, and then I'm going to do the same thing down here. And an n-gon is just a face that has more than 4 sides. Right? And now I can take this and I can start modifying this detail a little bit, start adding that shape, because now I can take these faces and I can push them back in space. And when I do that, you're going to see this detail appear, right? So see that little kind of step in there? I'll pull this forward a little bit. See how that detail now starts to show up? See that? And then we can just start pulling this stuff forward a little bit to get our kind of mandible shape back a little bit. But you can see how that shape now appears? See how that highlight is tracking down through here? And the fun thing about characters is, you know, you can You go crazy with them. You can kind of do whatever you want with them, which is fun. Unless you're doing a portrait, then it's got to be spot on. But if we're just playing around, we can kind of do whatever shapes we want. So that gives us kind of something like that. And at some point we're going to need to flip this over. And so to do that, I've got a really nice center line already down the middle of this. I'm going to add one more line right down the middle here so that I can easily just flip this. And so that way now if I go to the front view and I drag select all these edges in here or all these faces, I can just delete that and then I can just mirror. And then if we go to box mode, we can just stitch this up. And if this was dead symmetrical, actually, let's make our life easy. Let's grab this entire edge like this. And let's relocate our gumball to here. And then scale that to 0, which is going to flatten this entire edge. Now, when I mirror it off that edge, this whole thing lines up. Then I can just drag select and hit the join command. And the option up here is to join smooth. That way I can get that whole edge to kind of line up like that. All right. So let's pull a little crazy. Let's pull that out. This is one of the reasons that I like modeling in box mode is because you can see if anything gets crazy, it's easy to see what's going on and it's easy to fix it. And so this edge probably needs to come forward, this whole edge. Like that. Gotta grab the right arrow. That one. There we go. And so that we can start to look and see how this is kind of developing. All right, so now we've got our face. Now to make the rest of this skull, I need some side reference on this thing. I actually need this view. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unlock this image. I'm going to copy and paste it, and then I'm going to just rotate it -90 because it's going against the arrows. I'm going to go to my right-hand view, and then I'm going to just line this up with some semblance of lining up-ishness. That's a word, right? And then I'm going to go into perspective view. I'm going to tuck this back in space a little bit. Just I hate it when the image intersects the model, and we're going to lock this up. All right, how are we doing? 39 minutes. We're doing all right so far. So I'm going to pull this back because it needs to go back a little bit farther, and then I'm going to just make whatever adjustments I see that need to be made in the side view. Should have done this earlier, but really missed on this part down here. So let's drag all this forward. And because we kept this simple, it's really easy to go back and put it back where everything needs to be, right? That kind of gets us a lot closer to what our art looks like if we're worried about things like that. And if we're not, then we just kind of keep after it. All right, so that kind of gives us our skull profile to start with. And then we just need to start adding the rest of the details, right? And so if we go to this right-hand view, actually let's go to perspective, and we grab, say for instance, we grab like from here to here and then double click everything in between, we can just start dragging out faces, right? And this is going to start to enclose the brain box. And in this view, we'll just scale this out like that. And then we can start just imaging the shape. That. Here, and again, I'm intentionally not working symmetrically now because I want a little bit of asymmetry. I want it to kind of like follow the art. Like I don't want to just go crazy, but I want it to kind of have a slightly asymmetrical feel so that we don't fall into that uncanny valley kind of action going on here. And so with characters, there's so much leeway and so much, kind of freedom to be able to just look at it and make your decisions in 3D and decide like how you want this thing to end up looking, that, you don't really have to get super uptight about how tight this is following the art or, whatever. Pull these down here, kind of start following that a little closer. And then over here. Skulls are supposed to look a little scruffy. Now, if we wanted to like get super crazy about this topology, we may actually want to chase these edges all the way up so that it's quad, 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 right? I don't see right at the moment that that's hurting us much. If it gets to the point where we can't get this to do the shape, do the shapes that we want, we may actually have to chase this up. We may actually have to chase this up where we take this and actually just pull this all the way through like that. And then same thing here where we take this one. Actually, boy, that got really tweaked, didn't it? Let's fix that. That's why box mode is so important. This thing is just cranked way over. We don't want that. Things start flipping inside out on you. That's when you kind of want to address it. And so let's chase this one up too. Why not? Just see what it does from one side to the other. And in that case, it doesn't really affect anything. It hasn't like, violently changed it. But what it did do is it kind of smoothed out that topology a little bit. And it gives us a little bit more freedom to be able to kind of dial that shape a little bit more closely to what we wanted. So maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we'll leave that. Maybe we'll do that on the other side too, just so we have it. Looks like this has gotten a little tortured over here, so let's fix that. So very, very important to keep track of your box mode. If your box mode gets insane on you, the model will become something that is very, very difficult to manage. We don't want that. That's why we keep it simple and we keep layouts simple. We follow rule of 3, not rule of 33. We don't add a billion points when we want to transition. We just do what we need when we need it. I see sub-D models come in to tech all the time, and they've got like, somebody will have a model that looks like this. Like, I'm having a hard time getting the shapes that I want out of my sub-D model. I'm like, well, let's see. Let's turn the points on and like, what are you supposed to do with that? And in fact, my machine's gonna You know, like how, like what? How are you supposed to? No, stop it. Don't do that. So we don't want something that looks like that. In fact, this is even getting to the point where it maybe is a little overly defined for even my tastes. But for the time being, I think that's probably going to be fine. Let's look at closing this thing up now. So we've got a fairly good shape from the front, and those added edges have added a little bit of extra complexity down here that we may or may not want. So let's just dial that just a little bit. And then let's close up the back of this. And closing this up, we can basically say, all right, I want to go from this edge to this edge. And there's a couple of things that we can do. We can start scaling, hold down shift, and we can extrude edges in, and we can kind of peel it back like that. Or we can do something, because this model went, side to side. We copied our topology from side to side. We should be able to do this. And I'm going to intentionally leave two edges open in the middle. And if we bridge, I can add one more edge in here so that I've got enough. Actually, I only need one. And then I can modify the straightness, right? Like this. And so I'm going to actually add a little bit of curvature to the back of this thing. And I'm going to say, okay. And then all I need to do is just stitch up this little opening. And that closes up back of my model. Now we've got an interesting shape going on there. It looks like he's wearing a hoodie. So we need to adjust this, which is super easy to do. Drag. This was a really interesting challenge when I put this out there. I was surprised at how few people attempted it, and I even asked the question once, like, how come nobody's trying this? Like, this is actually kind of a cool thing. And everybody was like, oh my god, I've never done a skull, I've never done a character, I've never done anything like that. I can't even imagine, trying or getting started. And I was just kind of like, it's in Subd, it's actually so approachable and so easy to get. It's like, why wouldn't you just like grab some anatomy reference and get after it? It's actually kind of fun and easy to do, you know? There's a question: is this session being recorded? Yes, the session is definitely being recorded, and it will be on our YouTube channel, which is Rhinoceros 3D on YouTube. All right, and so in this case, I think that what we've got is the basis of our skull, right? Now, there's a few details that we may want to add in here. And how are we doing? 9:49, doing all right. So there's a couple of details in here that we may want to add, like this little dent over here. So I'm going to grab these two edges and I'm just going to put those close to where that dent goes. And we know that if we need an a dent or a bump, we need three edges, right? We don't have three edges, so let's add them. So I'm just going to go up here to the add edges, and I'm not going to do this both sides because I actually want them all to go this way. So I'm going to put one there. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put one there. Now I've got three edges, right? Check this out. So we didn't really change our shape much, but I can take this, and I can tuck it in, and that detail starts to appear. And then I can go to my ta-da. It's simple, really. And we can see how close we are to that, and it looks like the whole detail needs to go forward. So we're going to pull that like that. Just kind of do it moderately symmetrically. We don't want it to be perfect symmetry, but we're going to pull it a little bit like that so it's on both sides. Bottom, so I'm going to make those closer, right? Because closer together makes it tighter, farther apart makes it looser. And there's our detail. And then the other thing that we need to add, maybe that's a little deep. Anybody who's like got a lot of experience in anatomy is probably just in pain watching me do this, and I apologize. I went to car design school. I am a car designer. I am not a character artist. My old business partner, this guy named Kevin Pasco, who's brilliant, a brilliant artist. He always would just be like, "Stop, stop, don't do this. You're killing me." All right, so the last thing we need to do is we need to add this little hole here where I guess there's some nerves that come in through the back of your head or something. So we need to add that hole. And basically what I'm going to do, I'm just going to grab this face and I'm going to inset it. And that just essentially adds another detail. And then I'm going to delete it. And then there's our hole. And if we go to the right view, just start kind of dragging this until it kind of somewhat resembles that shape. Coolest thing about this is in the past, when you would do something like this, it would be either a polygon object or it would be something that is not super usable. This is, because it's Rhino sub-D, this is an object that you could actually take and convert to NURBS, right? And that is one of the coolest things as far as I'm concerned, is this is all of this data is super usable because all we have to do is run the to NURBS command and this thing becomes a NURBS object. Now, I've got a little bit, I don't like kind of the waviness of this, and so I'm actually going to do something that's a little bit counterintuitive. I'm going to scale this so that it's flat, but then I'm going to actually come through here and I'm going to grab these points. I'm going to bend them so that I can get a little bit cleaner shape. So I took a messy shape and I flattened it because that's something that I can control. And then I'm using the bend command to put that messy shape back into a shape that I actually wanted. Right now, I said that we shouldn't cross this up, and I've pulled this a little bit far. And maybe what I want to do is straighten that just a hair so that it's not crossing itself quite so badly. But in this particular case, I'm kind of okay with that because it keeps the model fairly low density and I can still make out what's going on. It hasn't I haven't lost control of the model. And so I'm not really going to worry a whole lot about that. And let's pull this eye socket out a little bit farther so that it's fairly similar. And it looks like edge up here a little bit. So now we just get into the fun stuff where we start like modifying this thing and you know, getting it to do what we want. And I've got some more reference. If I wanted to get into this a little bit deeper, I could certainly do so in order to you know, kind of increase the level of accuracy. Would just be a matter of just making sure that I'm following my reference. But the other thing that we may want to do to this is to add some teeth. And the teeth, basically what we can do is we can either separate these pieces and turn them into teeth, or we can use this as an opportunity to start extruding the teeth out. And what I'm going to do is, I think just for the sake of brevity, I'm going to just kind of even these out just a little bit. And anybody who's got any medical training or anything is going to cringe, but what we can do is we can actually add the teeth on this. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait until I add some thickness to this whole thing. So let's add some thickness to this. And by doing that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do sub D offset, and I'm going to offset it in. And I think I'm working, I got to find out what units I'm working in and how big this thing is. I think I should be in inches. Yeah, I'm in inches. And then let's figure out vaguely how big this thing is, because that will affect. So about 7 inches. All right, so if I do like a 150 offset, I think that should be fine. So go sub D offset. I'm going to offset it in, and let's go 150, and we're going to do that. So now this is actually a solid part. And if I wanted to send this to a printer, it would be a simple matter of, I didn't delete my input, so I've got one stacked on top of each other. So now this is a fully realized, fully, wall thickness, ready to go model. And I'm going to just remove creases because I don't want any creases on this. Oop, that added creases. I want to get rid of creases. There we go. And so now this thing has this interior space, and if I grab a clipping plane, you can actually see what, the wall thickness through this thing. So this is actually like a fully enclosed, fully dialed in, ready to go part. And so I can do one of two things. I can either go to NURBS, and this is going to actually create a closed poly surface, right? And this is just a regular Rhino object. You can take this and do anything that you want with it. You can Boolean it, you can, sticks, you can trim it, you can do whatever you want, right? So that's a super, superpower of this whole thing. The other thing, you can just simply mesh this thing as it sits, and you can preview it, and that is probably a little bit, probably one click more than it needs to be. So if I say, okay, now this is a beautiful mesh. One of the beautiful things about working in quads is it's subdividable. So this is a beautiful quad mesh. And so if you wanted to take this into something like ZBrush, the topology is already dialed in. You could already take this just as it sits. You could also export the control cage, this, as an OBJ using the extract control cage, control polygon. And this is now a mesh object, right? One closed mesh. You could take this, and this is now export this as an OBJ, and that would be your LOD1. That's your level of detail 1 or LOD0. Then you could subdivide that in ZBrush and then sculpt on it, do whatever you wanted. So if you don't like, the sub-D system in ZBrush, which I think I'm definitely in that camp. I just can't stand the interface, but I really, really appreciate the power that ZBrush has, but I hate the interface. I hate it so much. So I would rather work and lay out my base mesh here, and then if I was going to, sculpt or add some more detailing, I would then export probably something like this in, and then do my sculpting and stuff on that, right? So a lot of options, a lot of things that are available to us once we're in this Rhino sub-D system to be able to do kind of what we want. So let's throw some teeth on this guy real quick. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab some faces, and I'm going to grab alternating faces, with the exception of that one, because I want them to be disconnected. I don't want them to extrude together. And so I can just extrude out like that, and then I can come back and grab the ones that I didn't grab before, and I can go like that, and then that adds our teeth, right? And then we can, we can mess around with them all day long and decide how we want this, how we want those to go. And I'm not going to get too crazy about that, as far as, adding additional detail and stuff like that. But that's kind of how you'd get there. So let's throw the bottom jaw in here real quick, because that actually is another little topology layout experiment. I'm going to hide this for now. Actually, I'm going to save this. Nothing like doing a live demo for an hour and not saving. That's either a testament to my stupidity or a testament to the stability of Rhino. Either way, I'll let you make your own mind up, depending on how the rest of this goes. So I'm going to change this layer. I'm going to just hide it for the time being. And then let's like lay out the bottom jaw. And we've got the same issue that we had before, right? We just have to get started. So I'm going to start by just laying out a single polygon here. And then I'm going to go to box mode. And then I've clearly got an up here, right? So I need 3 points. So I'm going to start dragging, hold down control. I'm going to kind of put one in the middle, right? And then I'm going to take this and then I'm going to put this one at the top. So I've already set myself up for success because I know I've got enough detail in order to be able to pull this edge out, push that edge in, and leave this one alone and get that S-shaped transition. You can see it, right? You can see this happening, right? That is exactly what's happening right here. If we turn the points on for that, right? See that right there? Rule of 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. There it is. It's a rule. It's not a guideline. All right, so let's add one more piece here, and then let's pull this out like that, and then let's go this way, and that, and then let's add, I'm just going to use the extrude dot this time, pull this out like that. Now, there's a dent in the center of this, so I don't have enough detail, so I'm going to just simply grab an edge, and I'm going to add this edge in the center. Now I've got 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I can pull it in. Same thing here. I've got a Y branch in the back here, so I'm going to pull this one out like this. And pull this one out like this. And if I extrude them separately, I can get a Y branch. Super awesome if you're doing bicycle frames, especially fancy carbon bicycle frames. Lots of transitions. This Y branch in sub D is something that will make you mental if you try to do it in 3D. You know, if you try and do it in NURBS, it'll drive you crazy. But doing it in sub D is just an absolute piece of cake. So let's bring this back, and I'm going to not make this purple because I don't know why, I've never liked modeling in colors. And we're going to just pull this out like that. Actually, this is kind of the center point. So let's put that kind of where it needs to be. And then we're going to just bend it. Grab all of that. And I'm going to use the little converter up here to turn those into points. Go to the top view and bend. This is one of my favorite tricks. I love being able to just bend stuff instead of having to try and like drag it on intentionally. So let's stick that kind of down there. A little overzealous with my teeth, so let's fix that. And then it looks like, you know, we need to pull a little bit of this. We need to pull that around the corner there, which we can do. All this stuff and just burp. That's there. There we go. That tooth is a little tortured. I probably thickened it a little early. I probably should have waited until I got the whole thing settled down and then pull that around, but it's fun to see it do it. If I decided that I didn't like that, I could always go and I could just simply grab this entire strip and delete it, and then delete the other strips that connect all the other ones, and then, strip that inside shell back out. That's not a huge deal. Grab all of this up here. Pull this way. Any questions, by the way? Feel free to hit the chat if you've got questions. Happy to talk this through or talk less or all right, let's grab that and then let's bridge these two together. And I'm probably going to add a center line in there. And that gives us our basic bottom jaw. And then, we've got some adjustments that we need to do, like this entire thing needs to get kind of pulled back like that. Double clicking allows us to grab an entire edge. It needs to come back. And this entire kind of setup down here probably needs to bend backwards. Grab all of this like this. Don't like what that did. Now we're just playing, right? Now we're just dragging points around until we're happy with how the thing looks. So I'm going to get that side kind of like there, and then let's thicken this jaw. Do a sub D offset here. And let's thicken that a little more. Let's go like 0.25. And entire thing and uncrease it. And then we can start adding a little chin down here. And then I would subdivide it and add the lower teeth. But I think I'm going to leave the lower teeth off for now. Let's tuck this up. These guys, and let's rotate them out a little bit. Like that. Here, and again, I'm purposely doing this asymmetrically, so it's not going to line up exactly. Looks like we may have our jaw inside of itself a little bit. So let's do this. Get rid of this inside piece and let's re-offset it. I'm going to delete all that and re-offset it. No reason to mess with it if you don't have to. If you can just simply delete something and redo it simply, easily, why wouldn't you? All right, so I think that's about as far as I'm going to go. We're at 10. We're at an hour and 11 minutes, which I think is pretty good. So let's place this on the floor. So I'm going to set that there, and then let's rotate like that, like that, and then let's hide our images. Let's see what this looks like rendered mode. All right, so that's kind of the teeth. Let's not get too picky about the anatomy here, right? It's the process, it's the journey, not the result. But let's add a material to this. Let's add let's go with a plastic. Let's make this kind of a dark gray, like that. And then let's make our backdrop black, like that. And then let's put a point light inside this thing, kind of tucked up in there like that. And let's lights. And let's take this point and let's make it kind of a spooky orange. And go to ray trace mode and see what it looks like. And I don't like just the floating background, and this is a trick that I use a lot of times. So if we actually, instead of using a solid color, actually if we go and take this and make this a different color, see how you can see the ground plane show up? I actually like, let's go back to rendered mode. For presentation stuff, instead of using ground plane, especially when I'm doing dark backgrounds like this, what I'll do is actually make a piece of seamless, like if you're in a photo studio. And then put a black material on this. And then I crank the reflectivity down so that it's pretty mellow. And then you end up getting a little bit better result. See how that gives like a little more interesting background? And let's see our point light. Let's see where I put it actually. I actually missed putting it actually inside the skull. So we'll throw this here. Right view. There we go. We can mess around with that a little bit. And then let's crank it up a little bit. Ooh, now we're getting spooky. And then let's change this from constant fall off. Let's do inverse squared because that's how light really works. Let's do it like that. And that's probably a little too high. Let's crank it down again. Nope, not 50. Love the interactive ray tracing. So let's do this. And let's say that we like that. And then let's go here. Let's go to our post effects. Let's add a post effect. We're going to add glow. We're going to pick a color. And it's going to be, let's go with the eyedropper, and we want it to be that. And we're going to say OK. We're going to say on, and we're going to crank it up a little bit. And you can see that it starts to get really kind of spooky. All right, all live, all going on. And then I'm going to crank my denoisers on, and that's going to help. My NVIDIA card is going to help clean that up. We're going to let that roll and go from there. And then we can decide, like, you know, does that skull actually look the way we want it to look? Is it, you know, is that kind of really what we're going for? Does this plastic need to be, you know, matter? Does it need to be transparent and actually let some of the light glow through, which is kind of a cool effect. Like that. Gives it this kind of waxy feel. And then we'll just let it roll. And we can let it go till, you know, we're happy with the image. I'll probably let it res up a little bit, and then we'll call it a day. And if we don't like it, we can always reposition it. Kind of a Ghost Rider thing going on here. Back to my Toy Biz Marvel days. I used to work for Toy Biz and Marvel back in the day, which was fun. So clearly the teeth have a long way to go. Feel free to flame me in the comments for that, but I think I'm going to call it done at this point, because I think the adjustments and stuff from this point, from this base, are merely getting some reference, dragging the stuff around until it matches your reference. The other thing is, once you've done a skull like this, right? Well, not a skull like this, hopefully a little better skull than this, but once you've done a skull, save it. Save it in a file somewhere. Save it in a clip art file. The next time you have to do anything that has a skull or a character or a face, you can bust it out and just move the points around and make it into a new character. So once you've done it once, you've got the basis that you need in order to be able to do any other type of character that you want. You know, we could turn this into a, you know, a cute little kid, or we could turn this into a hideous monster just by how we change the proportions on the eyes and the nose and the face and the skull and, you know, all that kind of stuff. But it's all there already, and all you need to do is just keep pulling it around, right? So I think that's all I have for you today. This is, you're going to see we're what, minute and 25 into the rendering. We're about halfway done. I could probably stop it now and call it a day, but I'll let it just go ahead and finish. Glow effects, little rendering, little lights, an hour of pushing around, and we've got something that we can kind of mess with, right? All right. Any questions? Hit the chat. If not, I will let you go. Thank you very much. Have a lovely spooky season wherever you may be. Thank you for joining. I'm Kyle Houchins, tech and a trainer for McNeil. Go make great stuff. Thanks.